The Vercel AI SDK is easily one of the pieces of technology that I am the most excited about right now. It has been incredibly fun building out real applications with this. I didn't expect to do much with it, and I've kind of just very quickly fallen into like, hey, I actually want to make stuff with this because it feels really new. It's bleeding edge. It is allows us to do new things that aren't just like basic CRUD applications. It's a really, really cool set of tools, and they just released version 3.1, and I wanted to talk about what's in here and also show you guys how I'm using this and what I'm sort of thinking about for the future of these kind of AI applications and the way I'm thinking about it. Because I am actually building one of these right now. I'm thinking about how I want to put this into my bigger projects and all that stuff. So a lot of really good stuff here. Let's jump in. So the first thing here is Vercel AI SDK 3.1, Model Fusion joins the team. The Model Fusion stuff, I looked at this briefly beforehand. The Model Fusion stuff is really just the underlying provider that they seem to be using to get the APIs for all these different AI models. Really not super important here. The things that I'm really interested in are going to be the AI SDK core, the AI SDK UI, and the AI SDK RSC. So the first thing here is the AI SDK core. So drawing inspiration from projects like Drizzle and Prisma, you can imagine the AI SDK core as an ORM style abstraction for LLMs. And I really, really like this. To me, this feels like a really good way of thinking about how we can work with these LLMs because for a while now, we've just had like ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude and all these different AI models. And we've kind of just been building like wrappers on top of them is what people call them. That's where the sort of GPT wrapper term came from. And this gives us a really good way for interfacing with those to enhance our applications and do more complex stuff with them. Because obviously you can just do the things where you just do like a basic OpenAI call to like put a front end on it. You can just have like a chat interface and do that. But what these allow, as they say here, is these new APIs provide a set of unified low-level primitives to work with LLMs in any JavaScript environment. Abstracting away the quirks between major model providers, this simplifies integrating LLMs down to just two decisions. What kind of data do you want to generate, text or a structured object? This structured object piece is incredibly useful, I found. I'll show you how I'm using that in the real world pretty soon here. And then how do you want it delivered, incrementally, streamed, or all at once? You would think you would always want to incrementally stream it, but actually there are a lot of cases where you want to do it all at once because there was a use case where I was using it where like I needed to go through and just parse out users' text and then do a search off of that. So like we can't do anything until we have the full response from the AI. So that would just be a normal generate text call. But versus like if you're just doing like streaming down to the end user and you want to just give them like a recipe or you want to give them a breakdown of some of their data, then you want to stream it because that will create a better user experience. So it gives you the ability to pick which one you want to do. And they have this nice diagram here, which is basically kind of the abstractions we're working with, where we have at our base level here, we have our providers, which is OpenAI, Mistral, Google's, and Claude, all these different providers. I think they're adding in more later. Hopefully Llama gets added to this at some point. I want to see that. I really want to see more open source models in here. That's something that I'm personally going to try and do. I'm building with just the GPT models because it's easiest, but eventually, especially when I take these things to production and we start scaling them up, I'm going to want to try and figure out how to self-host some of these open source models, figure out how to fine tune them a little bit, all that stuff. Obviously, like this is bleeding edge tech. I'm super new to this. Like I have not built a huge amount with this. I have been building a real application here. There is so much to learn. And I think everyone is kind of trying to figure out how do we actually use these things. So here, the way they're doing it is we have these providers, and then the AI SDK is just a way of talking to these providers. This is a very similar mental model to an ORM to a database, and I really, really like that way of framing it. This is what it actually looks like in code. So it's really cool. All we have to do is just call this await generate text. We pass in whichever model we want. So in this case, they're using Mistral. Pass in a prompt, and then we're going to get the text response back. So this is much more pleasant to work with than a lot of the old just base level ChatGPT APIs or Mistral APIs or whatever. I've worked with these before, and they'll like give you like arrays back and a lot of weird annoying things. And it really is like the SQL metaphor is really good here, honestly, I think, because this generate text is very similar to a like it's kind of like a find first, if that makes any sense. This would kind of be like db.find first, and it'll just give you one text entry or one user profile entry or whatever. It's a really nice way of working with it with type safety and all these things. And then they show off down here that you can easily swap this out to use ChatGPT 4 Turbo. And all of this in this core part right here is completely framework agnostic. I could use this in SvelteKit, could use this in Next.js, use it in Remix, whatever. It all works, which is really nice. And then another piece they have down here, which has been a godsend in building these actual real-life applications, is generating structured data. This is something which was really painful to do before having SDKs like this. You would have to go through and you'd have to like bully the model like, hey, give me an output in this exact format, and then it would just give you like some JSON text and you have to parse that and hope that it works and it doesn't error and do all this stuff. But they're basically wrapping all that for you to where you just say like, okay, here's the schema of what I want my response to be. So you want to get a recipe with a name and a list of ingredients and a list of steps. And then you just pass in a prompt. So generate a lasagna recipe, and then it'll go through, it'll generate a validated type saved object, which is awesome, abstracts so much just nonsense boilerplate away from you. And then you'll get out classic lasagna, list of ingredients, and a list of steps. Great stuff. Then down here, we have the AI SDK UI, so the chat interface in seconds. This is actually one of the first things I played with, where what you can do here is you can just create your little post request up here. So this would be the backend endpoint, which would handle everything here. So we would take in our messages from the request, we would just go ahead and stream out the text, and then we'd return the result as a streamed text response. And then on the actual page itself here, we just have this nice use chat hook, which gives us all the pieces we need to work with this. And this is actually how I'm doing a lot of the stuff in the Weights AI application I'm building, which I'll show you guys pretty soon here. And I'm using a lot of these pieces because it's really nice to just have a list of the messages, just a really easy way of handling your input handle change, your handle submit. It just abstracts a lot of the just boilerplate away from you, which I'm a huge fan of. And then finally, the one that really got me into this, and I think the most interesting and exciting one in all of these, is the AI SDK RSC, which is moving beyond text. And this is the one where we get to do the fancy generative UI stuff. We get to have the tool and function calls, which are incredibly useful and will allow us to make much more complicated and advanced and, well, useful applications with this, because with those previous things, you really are in just, very basic GPT wrapper territory. You're just, that use chat interface example is literally just putting a front end on a chat GPT API call. Versus with this, what we can do here is we solve the two key problems of LLMs, which is limited or imprecise knowledge, and then plain text or markdown only responses. We can fix that by providing it UI ourselves. We can give it all of these pieces to actually perform useful functions. So right here, we have this nice example where they have the submit message function. This looks very similar to what I implemented in Weights AI. So we have our use server up here. So this will run server side. And then basically what we're doing down here is we're going to get our result and we're going to stream this UI down. We pick our model to be GPT-4. We pass in our messages. We have our basic text response, but then where it gets really interesting and where the really cool stuff comes out is this tools section. So in this tools section, you can provide the AI SDK a bunch of different things that it can now do. It's basically just providing it a bunch of functions it can call, and those functions return UI. So here we have this get city weather example. So get the current weather for a city. We pass in the parameters, so they have to pass in the city here. So the LLM will be smart enough to say, if you just say hey, give me the weather for San Francisco, it'll be smart enough to parse out of that query to grab San Francisco, pass that in as the city parameter here, and then you can just generate the UI for that here. So we just yield the spinner, we go const weather equals await get weather. So this would just be a backend database call that we provide ourselves. Again, I'll show you a real life example of this later. And then we just return the weather component with the info passed in. And that's it. We've streamed down real UI. And what this looks like is exactly what this demo is. So what is the weather in SF? There it is. Really, really cool stuff here. And I think finally down here, yeah, they close with towards a complete TypeScript AI framework, which I think is what they're looking for, which is awesome. The Vercel AI SDK 3.1 marks an important step towards delivering a complete TypeScript AI framework. With the AI SDK core, you get a unified API for calling LLMs that works anywhere JS or TS runs. With the AI SDK UI, you can build chat interfaces in seconds. And then finally, with the AI SDK RSC, you can go way beyond chat interfaces and deliver the next generation of AI native applications. And this is what I want to build. I want to build these AI native applications. That's what I'm really interested in right now. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the documentation, and then I'll show you guys what this looks like in the real world. So they completely refreshed the docs. This is so much better. Beforehand, it was they worked, but they were very basic and were a little chaotic, but this is much, much better. So let's start here with prompts. These are kind of the base layer that we're working with that generate text, stream text, etc. So they have a bunch of different stuff in here. And what you'll notice is this kind of feels like Prisma or Drizzle documentation. It kind of feels like, a bunch of functions to interface with our AIs the way Drizzle would interface with our database. So we have right here this little result equals await generate text. We pass in the model, we pass in the prompt, we get back a nice response to this prompt. Then we also have the ability to pass in some parameters. So the message prompts is where we can start to get a bit more fancy with this, where we can have multiple roles in here. So we have role users. So this is what the end user who is typing into their little GPT wrapper would be able to, that would be their input. The assistant would be the AI's response, and then again, back to the user. So this way we can basically record a conversation. So say we had like 10 different pieces of conversation, you could record all of those, and every single time we make a call to this generate text, we're gonna pass in all of those messages so the AI has the context of what they'd previously talked about. So it would know that the assistant had previously said, hello, how can I help? It would already know that it said that, so then it can tailor future responses to make sense in that context. So if we, for example, had like it already gave you a piece of information, or the SDK had asked you for more information, it would know what information it was asking you for. So this allows us to do more complex stuff. We can go down here and get even more complicated, add in our multimodal messages. So what's really cool what we can pass in here is we can actually pass in images. So we can say, we're asking it to describe this image in detail, and then we're actually just literally passing an image in. And I think I know OpenAI can do this. I think a couple of the other providers can. Hopefully, eventually they all can. So we can now add in some stuff here like, hey, describe this image. Really useful stuff in here. Then we have these tool messages. This is where we get into like really useful territory and where we can really deeply integrate this into an application in a useful way. So what these tool calls allow us to do, we go over to the documentation for these. Basically what they allow us to do is provide a set of tools that the AI can call, because obviously an AI can't tell you what the current weather in some location is, because it's just trained on data from the past and doesn't know current day stuff. It doesn't know live real-time stuff. It can't generate interfaces, et cetera, et cetera. So what we can do here is we can provide it a bunch of tools to help it answer the question. So we just give it a description of when it should use this. So it should use this when the user wants to get weather in a location. The parameters we pass in is the location. Then the execute just goes through and actually gets the information. And then this allows the AI to actually get a real answer to this and then return that to the user. So we can go in here, and this result will actually result in us getting a real answer to the question of what is the weather in San Francisco, which is a really cool sort of thing that we can now do. And then finally down here, we have our system messages, and this is really just to kind of bully the AI into acting and sounding the way you want it to. If you want it to have a certain tone, or you want it to do certain things, or you want it to act in a certain way, you can do that here with just these basic system messages to give it some more context about what it's supposed to be. Those are sort of the base layer primitives that we're now working with, which again, these are just ways of interfacing with the actual AI. I want to jump into my real life example and kind of talk about how we're really using these things. Okay, so this is a real world example of something that I'm actually building with this AI SDK and with these new AI tools. It is a personal workout assistant. It's right now it's just a weights tracker and a scheduling system. Eventually I'm going to add in some more basic stuff like goals, add in maybe like calorie counting, just basic stuff like that. Really just kind of like a gym bro companion type thing. And I've gotten pretty far in this, and it's going to be a real thing. I've been testing it out, using it in the real world, and there's been a lot of things that I've been learning about this, and I don't know, I think it's really cool, and there's a lot of things to kind of talk about here. So first and foremost, let me just show you how this works. So if I go in here, so I've already got a workout running, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on show me my workouts information, and basically what we're doing here within my action.tsx file, I'm defining the submit user message function, and in this function, I have all of these different function calls. So I have like view current workout, I have add sets, I have view all workouts, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these different functions are things that the AI can call. And every time I submit a message in here, it's going to go through and it's going to look at the things I've given it access to. And then it's just going to call the one that would make the most sense there and then send out UI for that. The whole point of this is to kind of just abstract away the very spreadsheety nature of weights trackers and stuff like that. So for example, if like this is like a real workout I did a couple days ago. So like if I wanted to go through in here and I wanted to be like, okay, I just did tricep push down 75 times 8 or whatever, I can paste that in here, and then we go through, and then I just get access to this UI. I can copy it, I can delete it, and then I save this in, and then if I go into my active workout again, I get this information added. So I've added this tricep push down in here. It's basically just a way for us to interact with our weights tracker via text instead of having to go through and do it via UI or via a spreadsheet or whatever. So this felt like a really natural way to kind of test this and run with this. And I don't know, I've learned a lot from doing this. So before I go any further, I kind of want to diagram this out for just to kind of give you like a visual picture of how this actually works, because this is a very different way of thinking about applications. So let's just say over here, I have my application. So this is like the actual UI screen. I have my responses up here, and then I have my text down here. So it's just like, I just did bench or whatever. So we did bench. We pass that in down here. So then what is actually happening when we're calling this? I've kind of described this, but I wanted to show it visually. So this is our actual little backend interface here. So this is going to be our AI SDK actions. Let's call it that for now. We need good names for these things. I'll figure that out eventually. So we have our little actions over here. And then within this actions, we have a bunch of different functions we can call. This is going to be add set. We have view all workouts. We have manage schedule. And we have a bunch more things in here, so you can imagine there's more. We'll say like floating way out here is GPT, because we're using GPT for this SDK. So what'll actually end up happening whenever I submit this is this will go ahead in here. So we'll take this I just did bench. It will pass it up here to our actions. It will go to GPT and I'll be like, hey, GPT, this is what the user just passed in. Here are all the functions I have access to right here. Which one should I pick? And then GPT will be like, well, this seems to be, he's adding a set. So let's go ahead and pick add a set. And then once it's picked add a set, it'll just execute that function. And what that function does is it just pulls out of the prompt. It pulls out, okay, he did bench. We want to match that with the saved exercises to that user because we want to make sure that we track these correctly in our database. We want to go through and pull out some like weight information. So like how much weight did you do? How many sets did you do? How many reps did you do? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we can just return some content. So then what this will actually do is this will actually return down to the UI itself. It'll create a component. So it will go through and it will return out this little like add set card. So it'll actually return that out here with that data pre-populated. So if we look at the actual code for this add sets function, what we're doing here is we are allowing the user to input their set. They can fill in the exercise, the reps, the weight, et cetera, et cetera. We pass in the exercise, we pass in the reps, and we pass in the weight. And then we go through in here and we can just do a bunch of stuff because again, this is just a function call. And that's the weird mental thing that you have to get used to is you're basically just letting the AI pick a function. So we're going in here, we're getting our current workout. If there's not a workout, we'll just give it basically an error. And whenever we return something from this function, that is what gets sent into the UI. So whatever we return is what gets added into our chat UI here, at least the way it's currently set up. So we'll return an error here. And then otherwise, if that's not here, I'm going to talk about this in a different video because this is another thing I did, but I actually used PG vector search to go through and actually match the user input to their actual exercise in the database. So if they had bench press saved as bench press instead of bench, it would go through and it'd be like, hey, those two actually match, and then match those together. This is a topic for another day. We go through and get that. And then finally, really the important thing down here is we're just going through and we're telling the AI like, hey, we just called a function. We provided the UI for the user to add their sets. And then we went ahead down here and we just return this card. So we return down this add exercise card server. And what this actually is just a normal React component. We're just passing in its initial state. Then we have our client side code here, which is just a normal React component. It's using use client, has TRPC in here, doing a bunch of basic form logic stuff, and that's really it. So it's just an enhanced way of doing these applications. I've been using this myself a lot, and one thing I've kind of noticed is this sort of flow that Vercel's kind of pushing here of like just creating a new card or a new UI every single time it's good, but it's kind of tiring and it's a little annoying, especially when I'm like on my phone in the gym. It's a little weird. So like every single time I go through and I add something, I have to add it and then I have to be like, hey, show me my current workout information. And I kind of solve this with a Band-Aid fix of like having like these shortcuts down here. So like if I want to manage my schedule, I can very quickly do that of just like, let me manage my schedule. I can edit this, add my exercises in, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of, I don't know, it's a little janky and it's not my favorite thing in the world. It's just more button presses and it feels a little more convoluted than I'd like. But the thing that I really do like here is I really like being able to do this like bench 135 times 9 thing, being able to just do that and have it know like, hey, you want to add this here. This is really, really nice. And this was what I wanted from the beginning. So what I'm kind of exploring right now is doing a sort of like hybrid interface here. So we go into, I'm like in the middle of building this right now. It's not done. I'll show this on mobile because this will be used on mobile. That's another problem we have with the AI stuff right now. It's really great on the web, but it's not, this is going to be tough to implement into a mobile app, at least at the same power as you can here. So what I'm doing here is we're going through, and this little card is fixed up here. So the way this will work is like when you get into like workout mode or whatever, we'll fix this up here. And then basically this down here will be our way of interfacing with that card, but the card itself will also have some ways of interfacing with it. What I'm doing here is I did a 3x5 and I'm going through and I have all these sets under here. So I have, you can drop down, you can see all the sets. I'm going to add in a button here to duplicate these, to delete these. So we get like the nice user experience up here, but we still gain the enhanced functionality of the AI down here. And you can imagine when this really scales up and this becomes potentially a real application, you would have the like ability to save sets. You also have the ability to ask it questions about the sets themselves. And this gets into a concept called RAG. I think it's called Retrieval Augmented Generation. That's basically just a fancy way of saying providing the AI with more context based when you do a query. So we could say like, if we wanted to add RAG for like, how is the trend, like how does this workout compare to last week's workout? I can give it the context of last week's workout. So I'd pass in just the raw data of here's the JSON of last week's workout, here's the JSON of this week's workout, answer this question about these data sets. And we can just keep adding features like that on top of it, and we gain all the benefits of AI, but we still want to keep these kind of nice traditional user interfaces, because these very tailored experiences of being able to like just have this up here and have this not go away and just, you know, manage it quickly and efficiently there, I think that's important. So a big question with all of this stuff and all of this tech is going to be, how do we kind of balance these things? How do we use these new AI tools to enhance our applications and make them better and get the power out of these things? Because there's a lot of power here, while not just like making it into a gimmick app. Because that is one thing that I kind of felt here is like, okay, this is cool and it does solve the one problem of spreadsheets suck, but a lot of these things do feel a little gimmicky. So what's the balance here? How do we do that? And I don't know. I don't fully have the answer yet. I don't think anyone does, but we're trying to figure that out. It's bleeding edge tech. And yeah, that's a very long-winded way of saying like, this is a piece of technology that I'm really excited about. I think the last thing I kind of want to close in this video with is going to be this kind of talking about like GPT wrappers and all these things, and the way I'm kind of feeling about that. A big thing you'll see on Twitter, if you follow like AI stuff, you see all these things, is people just talking shit on like, it's just GPT wrappers, it's whatever, it's going to get nuked by OpenAI, whatever. And I think to an extent that's kind of true, but I think I was listening to a talk from a bunch of, I think it was a YC panel. They were talking about all these new AI startups and all these things they're building. And one of the things they kind of brought up is like, you know, the GPT wrapper thing is a little disingenuous, because if you think about it really carefully, a lot of applications, a lot of traditional applications we use all the time, you could kind of boil them down to being SQL wrappers. Like at the end of the day, Twitter is kind of just a SQL wrapper. I mean, it's an extraordinarily large one, but it is just kind of a giant SQL database. The messages are SQL entries, and we're just providing a really nice UI and capabilities of interacting with that. And I think a similar sort of thought process can definitely be applied to these AIs as we scale these things up, where yes, in a way you could say like, yeah, this is a GPT wrapper, but we're building something on top of it and we're adding more functionality to it. And I think the interface and the data and all these different things we're using to tie all these things together, I think there's a lot of value there. So I think, I don't know, that's something, at least for me personally, is like just not psyching yourself out and just being like, oh, well, it's a GPT wrapper, who cares? But really think about like, okay, what can we actually do to make these things useful? And I don't know. I'm playing with this a lot. I'll definitely have more to say about this. I'm going to launch this as like an actual product. It doesn't look particularly pretty right now, but that's just because like it's just generated with V0, Vercel's little AI UI generator. It looks very shad CN-y. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but you know, it works. And I'm really just trying to test the core value prop here. Oh yeah, one more thing. This is all this code that I just showed off with this Gym AI, completely open source, links down below. Free to check it out and try it. Like I said, I'm going to be offering a paid hosted version of this, but self-hosting will be available. You can do all that stuff. Definitely check that out down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe if you made it this far. Thank you. And yeah, I will talk to you soon.